If there's one thing I've learned after 3 decades of working with couples, it's this. There is one question that instantly reveals whether a man is falling in love with you. And most women hear it, but they don't understand it. They end up missing the clearest sign that he's already imagining them in his future. I'm going to tell you something that will completely change the way you interpret men. Because here's the truth, men are not nearly as mysterious as they appear to be. The problem is not that they don't reveal themselves, it's that women often overlook the quiet ways in which they do. A man in love doesn't always show it with roses, dramatic gestures, or sweeping words of passion. No, the real signals are far subtler. They slip out in the form of simple, almost ordinary questions that most women dismiss. But hidden in those questions is his heart, trembling with vulnerability, cautiously reaching forward to see if you might meet him there. What I want you to understand is that a man's brain literally changes when he begins to fall in love. Neuroscience confirms what I've observed again and again. Physical attraction is present-focused. It's about the moment, the thrill, the dopamine rush of instant gratification. When a man is only interested in chemistry, his brain lights up in the centers of reward and pleasure. He's thinking about tonight, this weekend, maybe the next date, but nothing beyond that. That's why he can spend months with someone and never once bring up the future. It simply doesn't matter to him. But love is different. Love rewires the mind. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for long-term vision, planning, and deeper meaning, suddenly activates in ways it doesn't with mere attraction. And when that switch flips, a man can't help but imagine. He projects forward. He starts weaving scenarios in his head that include you not just now, but years from now. That's what I call future emotional projection. It's the moment his unconscious mind begins testing whether the story of his life could intertwine with yours. And here's where it gets fascinating. This shift doesn't come out in a dramatic announcement. He won't sit you down and declare, "I'm thinking about us long term." No, instead, it escapes him in simple, deceptively casual questions. Questions that reveal he is no longer just here for the ride, he is quietly trying to figure out if you belong in the chapters he has yet to write. The first question almost always catches women off guard because it sounds so generic. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Now, most women make the mistake of brushing this off. They think it's filler conversation, something he'd ask anyone, or maybe just an attempt to avoid silence. But make no mistake, when a man asks you this, and he's genuinely drawn to you, it is anything but casual. It is one of the clearest signs his heart has shifted into shared future mode. Let me explain why. A man who is only there for the moment doesn't care about your 5-year plan because he doesn't see himself in it. He may adore your laugh, crave your touch, and even spend nights wrapped around you, but he is not imagining you beside him down the road. That's why he never asks. The future, to him, is irrelevant. But when he begins to fall, his brain demands clarity. He needs to know, are you walking a path that he can walk with you? Are your dreams, your values, your direction aligned with something he can picture himself building alongside? And this is where so many women unintentionally miss their chance. They shrug, they answer vaguely, "I don't know, I'm just taking it day by day," or "we'll see what happens." They think they're being easygoing, but what he hears is uncertainty, a mismatch between the future he's starting to imagine and the fog of ambiguity he now faces. And in that moment, something inside him begins to pull back. But if you respond with honesty and vision, if you share your real hopes, your authentic dreams, even your fears, you're doing more than answering. You're allowing his mind to keep building that shared future. You're telling him, in essence, yes, I can imagine forward too, and maybe, just maybe, we can imagine it together. Here's what decades of experience have taught me. A man doesn't ask about your 5-year plan unless, at some level, he already sees himself in it. That question is not small talk, it is a confession. It is his way of saying, without quite saying it, I'm picturing us beyond today. I'm testing whether your story has room for me. And that's what makes your response so powerful. Because when you answer, You're not just speaking about yourself, you're showing him whether he can keep risking his heart with you, whether his projections of tomorrow have a foundation, or whether they crumble into uncertainty. So the next time a man looks at you and asks where you see yourself in 5 years, don't brush it off as nothing. Recognize it for what it is, the sound of his heart quietly opening, daring to imagine you as part of his forever. There's another question that slips out of a man's mouth only when something profound is happening within him. It doesn't always come dressed in perfect words. Sometimes it's direct, sometimes it's wrapped in hesitation, but the meaning is unmistakable. What do you feel for me? Now, this question may sound simple, almost too simple. But let me be brutally honest with you. For a man, uttering these words is an act of enormous courage. Men are trained from boyhood to armor their hearts. They are told to stay tough, to hide their tears, to keep their emotions locked behind an iron gate. Vulnerability is painted as weakness, and so they learn to live in control, projecting strength, hiding the tender truths that beat inside of them. That conditioning becomes what I call the male emotional armor. And most men wear it every single day. So imagine what it means when he looks at you, strips off a piece of that armor, and dares to ask, "What do you feel for me?" It may sound like a simple question, but in truth, it is a quiet revolution. It is him risking the very pride and protection he's been taught to cling to, simply because his heart can't stand not knowing where he stands with you. When a man reaches this point, something in him has shifted. He is no longer content with the surface level, the dinners, the laughs, the kisses. He needs to know if his emotions are safe with you. He needs to know if his heart is investing in fertile soil or if he is opening himself only to face rejection. Because let me tell you what I've witnessed time and again. When a man truly begins to fall, he becomes vulnerable in a way that terrifies him. The one who seemed unshakable in his work, confident among friends, strong in every other part of his life, suddenly finds his emotional stability tied to you. And that is terrifying for someone who has lived decades depending only on himself for balance. So when he asks this question, don't dismiss it as needy. Don't brush it off with vague answers like, "Of course I like you," or "Things are fine." Those words may seem safe to you, but to him, they can land like a door shutting in his face. What he is really asking is not for reassurance in the shallow sense. He is asking whether it is safe to keep walking toward you with his whole heart exposed. I've seen women misinterpret this moment and make a painful mistake. They hear his vulnerability and think it makes him weak, less masculine, less powerful. But let me tell you something fundamental. Weakness avoids truth. Weakness hides, dodges, and pretends not to care. True strength asks the terrifying questions. Only a strong man dares to look you in the eye and ask what you feel for him, because only a strong man can handle an answer he doesn't want to hear. And this is the defining fork in the road for so many relationships. When he asks, the future of your bond is decided not by fate, not by chance, but by how you choose to respond. If you meet his question with authenticity, if you name what you truly feel, whether it's certainty, hope, or even honest uncertainty, you are building a foundation of truth. That moment becomes a stepping stone toward deeper intimacy. But if you dodge, minimize, or give him hollow words, the connection weakens. It begins to fray at the very point where it could have deepened most. Remember this: when a man asks what you feel for him, he's not seeking perfection. He doesn't need you to declare forever if you're not ready. He doesn't need poetry or dramatics. What he needs is honesty. If you feel something real, dare to name it. If you are still discovering your emotions, tell him with sincerity. What matters most to a mature man is not whether the answer is everything he dreams of, it's whether the answer is true. Because deep down, he's not just looking for love, he's looking for a safe place where he can lay down his armor without fear. He's searching for the rare kind of connection where authenticity is met with authenticity, where both people can stand unmasked and unafraid. That's what makes this question so powerful. It's not simply about how you feel. It's about whether you are both willing to risk truth together. So the next time a man opens that vulnerable door and asks what you feel for him, pause. Recognize the sacredness of that moment. This is not just a casual inquiry. This is him putting his heart in your hands, silently praying you won't drop it. And if you can answer from your deepest truth, you are not only giving him the reassurance he craves, you are co-creating the space where real love begins. Because real love isn't built on endless charm or flowers or the thrill of desire. It's built in the terrifying, beautiful moments when two people dare to tell each other the truth. And when he asks you this question, that is exactly what he's inviting you into, the kind of honesty that makes a love worth keeping. Sometimes love doesn't show up in grand gestures. It doesn't always knock at the door with flowers in hand or bold words on the lips. More often, it tiptoes in quietly, disguised in the smallest, most ordinary sentences. A man will look at you and ask, "Did you eat?" Or, "Did you get home safely?" Or even just, "How was your day?" And because they sound so basic, many women don't think twice. They dismiss them as routine courtesy, nothing worth reading into. But let me tell you something I've seen in countless relationships. These little questions are often the loudest signs of love in development. To understand why, you need to know something about how men's minds work. Men, by nature and by neurology, tend to compartmentalize their lives. Work goes in one drawer, family in another. Friends, hobbies, responsibilities, each in its own mental box. This structure allows them to focus on one thing at a time, to pour all their energy into whatever is directly in front of them. But when a man truly begins to care for a woman, something extraordinary happens. She escapes the compartments. She becomes a constant presence in his mind, woven into the fabric of everything he does. That's why these small questions matter so much. When he asks whether you've eaten, it's not about food. It's about knowing you're caring for yourself, that your body and soul are being nourished. When he asks if you've made it home safely, it's not about logistics. It's about the fact that his mind cannot rest until he knows you're out of harm's way. And when he asks how your day was, it's not about filling silence. It's about wanting to step into your inner world, to connect with the pieces of your life that he wasn't there to see. These are not the words of a man seeking control. They are the words of a man whose heart has made you part of his daily existence. I've seen men who can sit through a business meeting with half their brain plotting strategy, while another part quietly wonders if the woman they love made it home. I've watched men cheering for their favorite team with friends, yet their hand keeps drifting to their phone, because no matter how thrilling the game, a part of them is waiting for that one message from her saying she's okay. That is love, not loud, not boastful, but persistent. And here's the tragedy. So many women overlook this. They think, he's just being polite, or worse, he's being controlling. They confuse genuine care with possessiveness, missing the key difference. Control comes from insecurity and fear, from a need to dominate. Care comes from love, from the desire to protect without restraining, from the longing to see you thrive. The tone and consistency reveal everything. When a man's questions are steady, gentle, and genuine, they are not shackles, they are threads of devotion. You see, men often love differently than women. While women may lean into words, into verbal expressions of affection, men tend to show love in action. And these questions, small as they appear, are actions. They are his way of being present even when he's absent, of holding you in his awareness even when life pulls him elsewhere. They are the emotional anchors he throws out to remind you, I'm here, even when I'm not right beside you. But here's where things often go wrong. Some women get tired of these questions. They roll their eyes at, "Did you eat?" or dismiss, "How was your day?" as repetitive and shallow. They fail to recognize that in these words lies the most consistent, reliable sign of a heart that is opening. And when they dismiss or mock it, something in him retreats. His instinct to care begins to feel unwanted, and slowly the bridge of connection weakens. If you want to know whether a man's heart is moving beyond attraction into something deeper, watch how often he breaks out of his compartments for you. Does he carry you with him into the quiet spaces of his mind? Does he check in not because he has to, but because he can't help it? If he does, you've already taken root inside of him. And here's what you must remember: the way you respond matters. When he asks these small questions, don't brush them off, don't roll your eyes, or respond with coldness. Recognize them for what they are, the language of care, and meet him there. Ask him how his day was. Ask if he's eaten. Show him that he lives in your mind too, even in the in-between moments. Because love is not built only in the big declarations. It is built in these tiny, everyday exchanges that weave two lives together until they feel inseparable. So the next time he asks, "Did you eat?" don't just say yes and move on. Let yourself feel the tenderness behind those words. They are not small. They are not meaningless. They are proof that you are living inside someone else's heart, even when you're not in the room. And if you can recognize that and respond with gratitude and reciprocity, you will find yourself building the kind of connection that lasts one steady, gentle question at a time. There is one more question a man asks when his heart has crossed a point of no return. It doesn't come often, and when it does, it speaks louder than any declaration of love. That question is, "Do you want to meet my family?" On the surface, it seems simple, just an invitation, a step forward in the relationship. But make no mistake, this is not casual. This is not something a man asks lightly. For most men, family is sacred ground. It is the place where they are most themselves, most vulnerable, most unmasked. Introducing you to that circle is not about social formality. It is about full integration, welcoming you into the deepest part of his life. When he asks this, he is saying several things at once, even if he doesn't put them into words. First, he is showing you his trust. He trusts you to see where he comes from, the people who shaped him, the dynamics that reveal his truest self. He trusts that you won't judge him for the imperfections or flaws in his background. Second, he is declaring that you are not temporary. You don't bring someone into the family sphere if you see them as passing through. Family is for permanence. And third, he is seeking coherence. A man in love doesn't want separate worlds anymore. He wants the people he cares about most to meet, to connect, to become part of one larger whole. There is also an element of validation here. When he asks you to meet his family, he is unconsciously hoping for their approval, for them to see in you what he already sees. This is not because he doubts you, but because when we love deeply, we long for harmony between the relationships that matter most. He wants his family to see you and silently confirm, "Yes, you chose well." I've seen men carry on casual relationships for years without ever bridging this step. They'll share dinners, vacations, even intimacy, but keep their family life completely separate. Why? Because in their minds, that relationship doesn't belong to the future. But when love takes root, separation no longer feels natural. Integration becomes essential. It's his way of saying, "You are not just part of my days, you are part of my life." And that brings us to the larger truth. Love rarely arrives with music swelling in the background, with dramatic movie moments or sweeping speeches. More often, it arrives in quiet, in the subtle shifts of how a man thinks, the questions he asks, the care he shows, and the circles he invites you into. Love reveals itself not in fireworks, but in consistency, not in grand drama, but in gentle persistence. The danger, of course, is that many women miss these signs. They wait for declarations, for extravagant gestures, for the kind of romance Hollywood has trained them to expect. And in waiting, they overlook the moments where real love is already showing itself, disguised in a question, in a small check-in, in an invitation to meet the people closest to him. So here is the reflection I want to leave you with, one that could change the way you see love forever. Not every man who makes you laugh, who compliments your beauty, or who desires your touch is falling in love with you, but a man who asks you these questions about your future, about your feelings, about your daily well-being, and finally about joining his family, has already begun weaving you into the story of his life. His heart has shifted from the present moment into the long horizon, and what happens next depends on you. When he asks where you see yourself in 5 years, will you answer with vague words, or will you dare to share your truth? When he asks what you feel for him, Will you hide behind safe phrases, or will you honor his courage with your own? When he checks on you, will you dismiss it as trivial, or will you recognize it as love whispering in its gentlest form? When he invites you into his family, will you see it as just another step, or will you recognize that he is opening the doors of his most intimate world for you? The way you respond can either strengthen the bridge he is building or quietly dismantle it. Too many women lose true connection because they respond with fear, with indifference, or with guardedness. And I understand why it's terrifying to open yourself when you've been hurt before. It's tempting to stay vague, to keep emotional distance, to protect yourself from disappointment. But here is the cruel paradox of love. The very moments that require your vulnerability are the ones where your fear will try hardest to hold you back. Mature love is not something that simply happens to us. It is a choice we make. It is the decision to be honest when it would be easier to be polite, the decision to be vulnerable when it would be safer to hide, the decision to build something real when it would be simpler to float on the surface. These questions he asks, they are not just curiosity, they are invitations. Invitations to choose truth over pretense, depth over comfort, love over fear. So the final question I leave you with is this. When love shows up in this way, in quiet questions, in steady care, in a man daring to let down his armor, will you have the courage to meet it? Will you recognize it for what it is, and respond not with hesitation, but with the authenticity of your own heart? Because love does not always come with thunder. Sometimes it arrives like a whisper, disguised as an ordinary question, waiting for you to notice that within it lies everything extraordinary. And now, I want you to sit with this truth. Love will rarely announce itself with grand speeches or cinematic moments. It comes quietly, in the simplest words, in questions most people overlook. But those questions carry the weight of a man's soul, his hidden longing, his unspoken desire to build something real with you. The tragedy is that so many miss it, brushing off his care, ignoring his vulnerability, or running from the very future they've always prayed for. Don't let that be your story. When love shows up at your door disguised as a simple question, don't look away, recognize it, honor it, and respond with the kind of honesty that can change two lives forever. Because authentic love doesn't beg to be noticed, it dares you to see it. If this message touched you, if it opened your eyes to something you've overlooked, then don't keep it to yourself. Share it, subscribe to HeartSync X, and join this space where we uncover the truths about love that no one else dares to say. Your future may begin with a single question, don't miss it.